everyone. My name is Landon, and this is the LAN Podcast. I'm here with
Alex
and Nico.
And today we'll be interviewing our very special guest, Mr. Dukos. So, Mr. Dukos, today we will be talking about how COVID affected students and what was your experience during COVID. So, yeah.
Awesome. First and foremost, thank you for having me today, guys. I appreciate you all, and I feel like I'm with professionals. This is great. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have and also talk about maybe your experiences with COVID. So.
All right. Okay, so for our first question for you is, how many, did you get a lot of students that came in to talk to you about their experience with COVID during?
So that, yes and no, right? So COVID affected people differently. So I was in the New York City Department of Education during COVID. So I worked with a lot of kids from the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn. Some students had houses, some students lived in apartments. So it really affected everyone differently. I had some students that willingly came to me and were like, again, they were like, this is a struggle. This is hard. School is hard. Life is hard. People in my life are getting sick. I'm seeing people in my hallway getting sick. And then other students actually were just reserved. Students that, ironically enough, in school were leaders and, they were involved in sports, all of a sudden shut down. And I couldn't find them. I couldn't get in contact with them. They just kind of distanced themselves. And it was it was a difficult time for those students. So to answer your question, there were some students that openly shared their experiences, and then some students I saw the reverse effect, or the adverse effect, where they just wanted to be in their room, under their blankets, and not talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Well, how was your personal experience during COVID? Like, what happened?
Initially, again, I will say this. I was afraid, right? Because it was something that I had little to no knowledge about. I'm not a health professional. I was getting the same news that your family was getting, you're getting, right? In regards to what this virus was. So it put a lot of fear in my mind, especially because at that time I was living with my parents who were elderly, right? So my dad had triple bypass surgery. My mom is a cancer survivor. So in my mind, I was like, how does this impact them? And my immediate attention went to protecting my family. Right, like I was afraid to get sick, not because I was concerned with my health, but how that would affect my mom and my dad, my newborn son at the time, my wife who was pregnant, right? Those were all the things that facilitated in my mind that affected me, right, as a person during this COVID-19 time.
Yeah, that's like.
Let me hear it. That's like.
Yeah, that's really just important to just stay it was definitely super scary for everyone because no one really knew at the point. So it was definitely scary. Everyone was just like, what is going on? So I definitely agree with that. So
yeah, when I was in second grade, this person was talking about is this thing coming? Are we gonna have to wear masks? And I was like, what kind of mask? Cause
yeah, I remember
so
I was in third grade and this one girl was like, oh, I heard about this COVID thing. I didn't know what it was because I didn't hear anything about it. And then a couple weeks later.
When I was in fourth grade, we were all worried because we were old enough to know COVID was a real thing and we could die from it. So we were always every day there would be 6 students missing from class staying at home.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, I will say when I first heard about it, I'll never forget. I was actually coming back from Florida on a family trip. And the taxi driver at the time, again, I just knew that there was this phenomenon happening overseas. And the taxi driver at the time, because again, taxi drivers pick up so many people from all over the world. Mm-hmm. I just remember getting in the cab and just being like, wow, this is different, right? The way he was, it was pristine. He had a garbage bag separating us from his seat. And even when he talked to us, he's like, yeah, there's this crazy thing happening. And no more than a week and a half later, schools were shut down. Businesses were shut down, right? So it was fascinating to see how fast that moment happened, and then a week and a half later, literally everyone's life on March 13th changed.
Yeah, it was really crazy because I remember just being like, oh, we have 2 weeks off of school, yay! And my mom would basically just homeschool me for those days. It wasn't like she would teach me a lot, but it would just be kind of fun. And then March 13th, it wasn't.
On March 13th,
a break.
Yeah.
That was the last time I saw my cousins for at least 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And the funny thing is, they live in White Plains, so they're not even that far. But it was that bad that we just stayed away from
I
each
remember
other.
during COVID, I barely saw my cousins because I barely really saw anyone. Because it was just oh, don't go anywhere because we were all super scared to get COVID. But I remember I was like walking around my like street, just like going up and down, just walking. And then my dad is like, "Oh, Landon, can you come and help me with like this tire? I think it popped." And so I turn and look at the tire, and then my cousins are there, and I was like so emotional because I hadn't seen them in such a long time, and it was super fun because I got to see them after like 5-6 months. And it was just like really nice because I hadn't seen them at all because of COVID, and we were all just scared to like it was like contagious. So
Interact.
And those
Yeah.
are the similar story I heard from all other students was just like family became distant, friends became distant. So that affects people's minds, right? Like you just feel like you're in this isolated world. So to see family, it just made it that much more, I would say, special or epic, right? Holidays just washed away. Think about this, like Thanksgivings were different, Christmases were different. All of these things change. And how did it affect our students? Landon, to your point, you mentioned 2 weeks of homeschooling. Right? To me, that's slightly a privilege. Like at least you had some form of education happening, whereas there were other students that I counseled that had no homeschooling. So even in that 2 weeks, they started to fall behind academically, and we started to see that more and more as the year went on with COVID.
yeah. But then like after those 2 weeks, we didn't go back to school. It was just that we had like a couple of days off. Like we didn't like do much, and then I started virtual school, and then that went on for like the whole year. We just logged on every morning and did our schoolwork on the Meet. And then in 4th grade, hybrid became a thing, and then so kids started going on different weeks of the day. I didn't do hybrid. I stayed virtual the whole time. But my 3rd grade virtual experience was like my 4th grade virtual experience was better than my 3rd grade virtual experience because I think my 4th grade teachers on Zoom and stuff, they were really good at the technology stuff, so you could like definitely learn more, and because I knew how to work it all. So I really just liked them as teachers, and I liked my 3rd grade teachers, but they just like it was so new that we weren't all like used to it yet. But then with 4th grade, we had already had like a year before that we could just like sink into it all. So yeah.
Yeah, like COVID is like very scary because like you think about your elders, like your grandma or grandpa, they are more vulnerable to getting worst case of COVID. Like worst case scenario, they could have died because it was that bad. And like I had it once, it was just horrible. It felt like I couldn't even stand up.
Yeah, I remember like it was New Year's Eve. Yeah, it was New Year's Eve, and so I just had a cold like the day before. I had a cold that day, and I didn't think any of it. I didn't think any of it. So I'm sitting there, and then the next day I have a cold more, and so my mom's like, "Okay, tomorrow I'll get you tested for COVID." So I remember the next day, it was my sister's birthday, and so I went down to like, I forget where it was, but I went to go get tested for COVID. And then I was like sitting in like the lobby chair, and they whispered like to my dad, or they went over to my dad and whispered in his ear like, "I have COVID." And I remember being so upset because I was supposed to see my cousins that day because I still hadn't seen them in a while because of COVID still being a thing. So I was really, really upset. But what was good is I didn't have that much symptoms. Like I had like cold, and that was it. Like I didn't really cough at all. Like I just had a stuffy nose. But it wasn't like any huge symptoms. Like Alex said he felt horrible. Like I felt like fine. I could like do different things. But like what was really annoying is I had to be like isolated in my house for like 10 days, and I couldn't go outside, or I couldn't really do anything. Not like I could in the first place because you still have to stay inside, but yeah.
When I had COVID, because my sister, she's vulnerable to anything she gets. So, like, if there's a sickness, someone has a sickness in her class, boom, she gets it. And apparently she got COVID, so I had to stay isolated in my room. The only place I could really go to was school. I ate food in my room. I did my work from my room. I couldn't even really go outside. And then I got COVID. The good news was I was asymptomatic, so I was, like, completely fine, no cold, nothing. But my sister and then my mom got it as well. So they were both like kind of bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one in my family got it but me, which was like fine. But I was,
So you're
Great.
a rare breed.
yeah,
The solo COVID in your
I
family.
know.
Yeah. No, so that's great. I guess COVID is an accomplishment. Back then, it was like, oh my God, how did you?
Yeah.
Remember how you felt when you got COVID or something?
Oh my
It
God,
was
I
almost
could-
the most devastating thing. Like you have COVID. It's like, oh man.
I always
know.
get so mad when my brother and sister get sick. I'm like, ugh, I
I
can't
was just
do
kinda
stuff.
devastated.
Yeah,
These emotions are real.
I was really, like Nico said, I was like asymptomatic. I wasn't like, I didn't have any symptoms, but it was like so groundbreaking, almost like it's like you have COVID. Like, but it's almost like you think it's so bad, but it's really not. It is horrible because then you can't like be around anyone, but the symptoms are like, they're not bad at all.
No, absolutely.
I mean, when I had COVID, I was like throwing up and like it was horrible. But I only had it for a day, and everyone else in my family got it, which is everyone like on the same day, and like everyone just had it for weeks, and it was just like
But I remember, like, because me and Alex were neighbors, so we will, like, during COVID, we went outside to play with, like, our other friends, just, like, because we wouldn't go inside of each other's houses because it's just an, like, closed area. So, like, there's just, it's not as fresh as outside, so I could, like, be getting germs or stuff like that. So we wouldn't go inside each other's houses. But I remember when we were still doing virtual school, my friend's sister started getting like a cold, and that's when like we weren't allowed to play anymore. Like we literally had to stay inside. Like it was so weird because our friend's sister doesn't play with us. Like she doesn't really do anything with us.
she
So
plays
her
with
just
my sister though, so it's more scary for if like they play with like people that you know, that you're related to, that you hang out with a lot.
yeah. So it was definitely like scary because we all felt like pretty bad for her because she did end up having it, right?
Yeah, she did.
And it was definitely scary because we were all like sitting inside, just hoping the best for her, making sure like nothing bad happened to her. We would like send to get well notes and stuff like that. But it was like we couldn't really do anything. And then when she got better, we went back out, and none of us really got it until me, really. And yeah, that was pretty much it.
Well, on the good side of COVID, we might have achieved things during the time. For example, like my dad learned how to make pizza really well, homemade. And
Nice.
what things did you guys like achieve?
I learned how to cook. It was fun.
What's your favorite dish?
I love to make this rice dish that's like, it has this spinach and butternut squash. It's really good. It's one of my favorites.
Chef Ramsay over there.
Yeah.
I just like I didn't like learn how to cook or anything, but I did since I'm like I love to draw and stuff. I have like a bunch of art supplies, and I just would like be in my room drawing for like a lot of COVID, and that would be really fun.
Also, like, we would just play, like, when we were at your house, like, we weren't inside. We were on, like, your front porch, and you were inside. And we'd all just, like, open up all the windows
Oh,
and, like,
yeah.
play video games through the
since-
windows.
So since they weren't allowed to come in my house, I was the only one that had like a video game console at the time. No, I had like no, it was Fortnite, right?
Yeah.
So I was the only one that had Fortnite out of all of us. And then so we would open the screens of the windows in my house, and they would lean in and watch me play, and then I would give the controllers to them, and they would each have their own turn playing because they couldn't come inside my house.
After sanitizing,
And
right?
yeah, we had to like wipe down all the controllers. Like it was.
It was chaos.
It was really crazy, but it was like looking back on it now knowing that COVID's like over, which is so super amazing. It was crazy. Like I never thought that would like happen.
Yeah, no,
Well, for me, after I finished all my schoolwork, because my teacher used to assign us work on Google Classroom, usually every day at 3 o'clock, we would play Fortnite with all my cousins. And the good thing is, we could do anything from anywhere. For example, like one of my cousins, he lives in Massachusetts, and he was stuck just like us, so we were just playing for like 3 or 2 hours.
So video games was a connector for you, all right? And
Yeah.
I found that
Yeah.
in a lot of my students as well, is they utilize kind of that as an escape, but also as a way to communicate and, come together with friends or family.
Yeah.
Like that was the way to come together. So when families or parents were concerned, like, oh, my son's on or my daughter's on online gaming for so many hours, I had to kind of help the family understand like that's their only social interaction outside of school, right? So maybe it's beneficial for them to play Fortnite, right? To play Call of Duty and all these games is because that was your exposure to friendship at that time, right? Because you couldn't leave your room in your houses. But another thing I saw with COVID was innovation, right? The fact that your friends went to your house, you opened windows and you played Fortnite, like it showed that our students were very creative in the ways to get things done, right? You didn't just say, all right, well, I can't really have my friends over to play video games. You're like, how do I get my friends? So there was a lot of inquiry happening with students, which again, in education, forced us as adults to think differently. It's like we've been doing this thing called learning the same way for 100 years. COVID showed us that we should be doing it differently because our students are now ready to adapt, right? So the good thing that came from COVID for education is there's been a lot of change in our system of what we teach students, how we teach students, and what the word engagement means, right? Because again, like you with your friend, it's the same thing with school. Like we could continue to do the same thing over. You could have been like, well, I can't have my friends over because they can't come in my house. But you thought innovatively to open the windows. They're not in your house, and then they can play video games. It's the same thing that we're asking our educational professionals to do is let's think creatively. Like we have a podcast series now for students. Students learn from podcasts. How do we infuse that in learning? You know? So that's what COVID did for us. It's like, let's be creative in this learning process, and let's get our students excited about learning.
Yeah.
You got to really find ways to like compromise at this. Like you can't like do this like easily. It's like hard. You need to like figure stuff out. It's like annoying.
And what was good is that we wouldn't just like give up on like, oh, like you said, I would open the windows. It's not like I was just like, oh guys, we can't play video games because we can't go inside each other's houses. We found different ways to do things. And it wasn't even just the video games. We had many different things that if we couldn't go inside each other's houses, we still found ways to do.
Like during the winter, we couldn't go anywhere. All the parks are closed down. So we would just go sledding in my backyard because we had a big enough hill.
And we would like basically, because his backyard, it has like a bunch of different like roots and hills and stuff. So we would go through different things. We'd make like different paths and sled like tracks and stuff. And it would be super fun because we'd find different ways to do things without having to go somewhere or inside somewhere. So.
Well, what did you guys think about the COVID masks? Did you like them? Did you hate them?
Well, I remember I would like wear them the whole time. I would wear them like all the time because I had to. But in 5th grade, when we went back to school, we still wore them until like I think it was like May-ish.
Mid-year.
Yeah, it was May.
Yeah.
That's when they made the announcement.
That we didn't have to wear them anymore. And I was super excited. I'm like, oh my God, this is great. I don't have to wear my mask anymore because it was definitely getting tiring of wearing the mask every single day. And I had it off for the first day, and it was so weird. Like, and some kids still had theirs on. They just didn't feel comfortable with taking it off. And I totally understand that because the next day my mom was like, Lynn, I don't know if I feel comfortable with you just taking off your mask still in school. And so I just wore it for a couple of days until like I kind of got used to it that other people were taking theirs off. And so then I took mine off, and it became like kind of easy.
Yeah, like my mom would like make me wear a mask. Like she's like, you're not going to school if you don't wear a mask. And like when you were virtual, like it felt like you could, like I was worried about falling behind because I was not like in person. And like math felt a lot harder, and like field day honestly was horrible.
Yeah.
Everyone was just crying at the end of the day because no one was having fun.
But since I enjoyed 4th grade so much virtually and just my teachers, I remember like, since it was because I'm in dual language, so I have an English teacher and a Spanish teacher, and it was my Spanish teacher's final year because she was retiring. So we were her final class, and we were all just so emotional and like crying because we didn't want to say goodbye because we just had a great year, and it was so different virtually, but we all got used to it, and it became like almost like, I know this is like weird to say, but like we were just like a little family as our class. It was like really nice. So I enjoyed my 4th grade year a lot.
I remember for virtual, I was in 5th grade. My teacher was a dual language teacher, which means I wouldn't have her if I wasn't in person, but she was doing virtual. So it like really helped me because she was a really good teacher. She knew how the Google Classroom worked and stuff. she taught us all a lot of things, and then I really improved from that year.
All right, so I think those are all of our questions and what we have to say for this episode. So we really enjoyed having you, Mr. Duco. So thank you for coming on.
So let's give a big round of applause for him.
Round of applause for you guys. You guys are awesome. Naturalists.
So yeah, thank you for coming on, and thanks for listening.
Thank you guys.
So